She don't chase, she attract, that's a big fact. Move smart, level up, never look back. She the wave, make them surf when she walk in. Talk money, every combo like a drop-in. Too rare, they could.
Birmingham police are investigating an early morning shooting. It happened around 1:45 this morning in the 800 block of Green Crest Turn in Birmingham. When police got there, they say they found a woman suffering from an apparent gunshot wound. We're told that victim is 21-year-old Mia Nixon. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Police are looking for the person who shot her. Anyone who has information in this case is asked to call BPD's homicide unit. That number is 205-254-1764. Or you can call Crime Stoppers and remain anonymous, 205-254-7777.
The night was quiet on Green Crest Turn. January 10th, 2024, Birmingham, Alabama. Most residents were asleep when the sound of gunshots shattered stillness at 1:45 a.m. By the time police arrived, 21-year-old Mia Chardell Nixon lay motionless in her driveway, struck down by a single bullet. What investigators would soon discover sent shockwaves through the community. Just 30 minutes earlier, Mia had been the subject of a Facebook Live broadcast where someone had publicly labeled her a setup queen. From social media accusation to death in half an hour, this wasn't random. This was calculated violence. The connection between that broadcast and the bullet would lead detectives through one of Birmingham's most disturbing cases in recent memory. It would reveal the dangerous speed at which online conflict can transform into deadly reality. And it would expose a suspect possibly linked to numerous other murders across the city. I'm your host, and this is a story of how 30 minutes changed everything for Mia Nixon and her family. Before we continue, if you appreciate thorough, respectful coverage of true crime cases, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Your support allows us to continue bringing these important stories to light. Now, let's return to Birmingham, January 2024. And the events that would forever change one family's life. The morning news reports were brief and clinical. Female victim found deceased from gunshot wound in eastern Birmingham. But Mia wasn't just a statistic. She was a vibrant 21-year-old with aspirations, relationships, and dreams.
All men gathered in the ground with angels fear. Each one got a piece of how we ended here. How we ended here. How we ended here. Red bandana, hand cannon. That's the price of admission. Quick to spark and leave a mark.
All ended abruptly in her own driveway, while family members slept inside, completely unaware of the violence unfolding just steps away. We heard the shots and looked out the window. One neighbor later told reporters, someone was running away. The whole thing happened so fast. The speed of this violence makes it all the more tragic. 30 minutes. That's the window between Mia being labeled online and her death. 30 minutes to process an accusation. 30 minutes of life remaining. Even more disturbing than the timeline is what investigators would eventually uncover about the suspect, 22-year-old Damon McDaniel of Fairfield, Alabama, a man whose alleged violent history would shock even veteran investigators. A man potentially connected to not just Mia's death, but possibly 14 other murders in the Birmingham area. As we examine what happened that January night, we'll uncover how online accusations can transform into deadly catalysts. We'll follow the meticulous police work that led authorities to McDaniel. Most importantly, we'll remember Mia as more than a victim, as a person whose life held value far beyond the circumstances of her death. This isn't about sensationalism. It's about understanding how quickly modern conflicts can escalate and the very real consequences of those escalations. It's about a community shaken, a family devastated, and a legal system facing a suspect whose alleged violence extends beyond this single case. The central question remains, how did a Facebook Live broadcast become a death sentence in just 30 minutes? Before we continue with Mia's story, I want to acknowledge that we approach these difficult subjects with respect for the victims and their families. Our goal is never exploitation, but understanding, because understanding is the first step toward prevention. If you value this approach to true crime storytelling, please take a moment to like this video and consider sharing it with others who appreciate thoughtful coverage of these difficult topics. To understand the true impact of what happened that January night, we must first understand who Mia Chardell Nixon was beyond the headlines that would eventually define her final moments. At 21, Mia had established herself as a familiar presence in Birmingham's Crestwood neighborhood. The 800 block of Green Crest Turn wasn't just an address, it was home. The modest houses, familiar streets, and neighbors who recognized each other created Mia's world, a community where she had built her life and formed meaningful connections. Crestwood sits just east of downtown Birmingham, characterized by its mix of long-term residents and younger families. Unlike the anonymity of larger urban centers, Crestwood fostered a sense of belonging. Neighbors noticed when someone was absent. They recognized unfamiliar vehicles. They heard unusual sounds in the night, like the gunshots that would alert them of tragedy in the early hours of January 10th. Mia lived with her family in their Green Crest Turn home, a fact that makes her death all the more heartbreaking. While her family members slept inside, violence found Mia just steps from where they rested. The proximity of loved ones, present yet unaware, adds another dimension of tragedy to an already devastating story. "The houses here are close enough that we all know what's happening," said one resident who requested anonymity. "That's what makes this so shocking. Someone was hurt right here among us." What made Mia stand out wasn't extraordinary wealth or fame, but the ordinary connections that define most meaningful lives. She was a daughter, a friend, a community member, a young woman constructing her future day by day. Like many 21-year-olds, she likely balanced ambition with uncertainty, independence with family ties. Her daily routines, the paths she walked, the places she frequented, the people she greeted, created the fabric of a life now spoken of in past tense. Morning greetings to neighbors, evening returns home, casual conversations that seem insignificant until they're no longer possible. According to Officer Truman Fitzgerald of the Birmingham Police Department, Nixon was beloved, talented, and really excelling in the hair and nail field. She stood at that crucial junction between youth and full adulthood. Some of her peers would be finishing college, others establishing themselves in trades or careers, many still discovering their paths. Mia's potential, like her life, was cut short before it could fully realize. Those familiar with the neighborhood describe a community where young people like Mia often gathered at nearby parks or local establishments. Weekend evenings might include visits with friends or family gatherings. Weekdays followed the rhythm of work or study. Normal life until it wasn't. What stands out in conversations with area residents is how ordinary Mia's life appeared. No previous incidents had marked her as someone in danger. No history of threats preceded the violence. Her social media presence, while active enough to become the platform for that fateful label of setup queen, hadn't previously signaled any unusual conflict. This normality makes what happened all the more jarring. The abrupt transition from everyday life to violent death creates a stark contrast that disturbs our sense of how the world should work. Young women should return safely to their homes. Communities should protect their members. Social media disagreements should remain just that, disagreements. Birmingham itself shapes the context of this story. A city of approximately 200,000 residents, it balances Southern tradition with urban realities. Its neighborhoods each carry their own character, from historic districts to developing areas. Crestwood exists within this diverse landscape, neither the city's wealthiest district nor its most challenged. It's simply home to people like Mia, building lives within its boundaries. The night of January 9th, 2024, began as countless others had. Nothing marked it as Mia's last. No obvious signs warned of approaching danger. She was simply a young woman living her life in a familiar neighborhood among people she knew, with reasonable expectations of safety and continuation. Understanding who Mia was, an ordinary young woman in ordinary circumstances, makes what followed all the more incomprehensible. And it raises the central question that drives this investigation. How did her ordinary life intersect with extraordinary violence? The evening of January 9th, 2024, began unremarkably for Mia Nixon, a Tuesday night in Birmingham. typically a quiet time when most residents are winding down, preparing for the workday ahead. For Mia, this particular evening would start normally, giving no indication of the tragedy to come. What we know about those final hours comes from a combination of witness statements, digital records, and police reports. Together, they create a timeline that becomes increasingly troubling as it approaches 1:45 a.m. As darkness settled over Green Crest Turn, Mia was at home with her family. The neighborhood had fallen into its nighttime routine. Lights glowing behind curtains, occasional cars passing, the distant sounds of the city providing a constant backdrop. Nothing suggested that this night would end differently than countless others before it. Sometime during the evening, social media, specifically Facebook, became a critical element in what would unfold. While the exact time hasn't been disclosed in public records, investigators confirmed that a Facebook Live broadcast became the turning point. During this broadcast, Mia was publicly labeled a setup queen. The term requires context. In social media language, calling someone a setup queen implies they lure others into compromising or dangerous situations, essentially setting them up for harm, embarrassment, or exploitation. It's an accusation that questions character and intentions, suggesting deception and manipulation. For a 21-year-old woman, such a public label represents more than just an insult. It's a reputation-damaging claim broadcast potentially to hundreds or thousands of viewers in real time. We don't know how Mia reacted when she learned of this broadcast, but the timing, approximately 30 minutes before her death, creates an unavoidable connection. Did Mia see the broadcast herself? Did someone inform her about it? Did she respond publicly or privately? These questions remain part of the ongoing investigation. What's certain is that this digital accusation preceded physical violence by merely half an hour. The specific content of the Facebook Live video have not been fully disclosed by authorities, who continue to treat it as evidence. However, sources confirm that the broadcast included direct references to Mia by name and explicit setup queen accusation. Viewers of the live stream would have received an immediate, unfiltered impression of Mia based solely on the broadcaster's claims. As the clock approached 1:30 a.m. on January 10th, Mia was somehow drawn outside her home. Whether she went willingly or was lured remains unclear. What is known is that she ended up in her driveway, a space visible from the street, yet still within the boundaries of what should have been her safe domain. The neighborhood was quiet at this hour. Most residents were asleep, windows dark, streets empty, the perfect conditions for someone approaching with harmful intent. Surveillance footage from nearby properties would later help investigators track movement in the area. But in those crucial moments, Mia was alone. At approximately 1:45 a.m., the stillness broke. Multiple gunshots echoed through Green Crest Turn. Neighbors, startled from sleep, would later recall the sudden, jarring sound, unmistakably gunfire, unmistakably close. "I heard 3 or 4 shots," one neighbor told reporters. Then car doors and tires squealing away. Inside Mia's home, her family remained unharmed but would soon face the unimaginable. Outside, Mia lay wounded in the driveway, the victim of what appeared to be a targeted attack. The response was swift but futile. Someone called 911, reporting a person shot at the 800 block of Green Crest Turn. Birmingham's East Precinct officers arrived quickly, securing the scene while emergency medical personnel from Birmingham Fire and Rescue assessed Mia's condition. Their assessment was grim. Mia Chardell Nixon was pronounced dead at the scene, her life ended by gunshot wounds sustained in her own driveway. The time between the Facebook Live accusation and her death had been approximately 30 minutes. If you're finding this account informative, please take a moment to give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue producing thorough, respectful coverage of these complex cases. As dawn broke over Birmingham on January 10th, the scene transformed. What had been a quiet residential driveway became an active crime scene. Yellow tape created a perimeter. Officers documented the location of shell casings. Forensic teams collected ballistic evidence. Photographers captured images that would later help reconstruct the sequence of events. Neighbors gathered beyond the tape, faces showing a mix of shock, fear, and sorrow. Some had heard the shots. A few had glimpsed shadows fleeing afterward. None had witnessed the actual shooting. Inside Mia's home, family members grappled with sudden loss. Outside, investigators began the methodical process of tracking backward from effect to cause, from tragedy to motive. The timeline was established. Social media accusation at approximately 1:15 a.m., gunshots at approximately 1:45 a.m., death pronounced shortly thereafter. 30 crucial minutes that connected digital conflict to physical violence. 30 minutes during which Mia Nixon's ordinary life transformed into an extraordinary tragedy. As morning light spread across Green Crest Turn on January 10th, the neighborhood transformed into a hub of methodical activity. Birmingham's East Precinct officers had secured the perimeter immediately after arriving, but now the full investigative machinery engaged. This wasn't just another crime scene. It was the beginning of a complex case that would eventually expose a pattern of violence extending far beyond a single tragedy. The initial response focused on preserving every detail at the scene. Officers documented the position of Mia's body in the driveway, marked the location of shell casings, and photographed the area from multiple angles. Nothing could be disturbed until every element was recorded, a process that neighbors watched in somber silence from beyond the yellow tape. They were so thorough, recalled one resident who witnessed the morning's activities. They looked at everything, the ground, the house, even checking the street drains and bushes nearby. This thoroughness would prove crucial. The ballistic evidence, specifically the shell casings found near Mia's body, provided investigators with their first tangible leads. Each casing carries microscopic markings unique to the weapon that fired it, similar to a fingerprint. These markings would later help connect this crime to others. But in those early hours, they simply confirmed what type of weapon had been used. Alongside the physical evidence collection, officers conducted preliminary interviews with Mia's family members and neighbors. These early accounts helped establish the timeline, confirming that multiple shots were heard around 1:45 a.m., followed immediately by the sound of a vehicle speeding away. Though no one had seen the shooter clearly, several witnesses reported glimpsing a figure rushing from the scene. Digital evidence quickly became central to the investigation. When investigators learned about the Facebook Live broadcast that had occurred approximately 30 minutes before the shooting, they immediately sought to preserve this content. Social media evidence is notoriously ephemeral. Broadcasts end, posts get deleted, accounts disappear. Moving quickly, they contacted Facebook's parent company to secure the original broadcast before it could vanish. The content of that broadcast, particularly the public labeling of Mia as a setup queen, provided context that might explain why she had been outside her home at that late hour. Had someone contacted her after the broadcast? Had she received messages that prompted her to step outside? The digital trail became as important as the physical one. Investigators worked methodically through phone records, message logs, and social media interactions from the hours preceding Mia's death. Each digital interaction represented a potential clue, each message a possible motive. This painstaking process required patience. Reconstructing a digital timeline is complex work that unfolds across multiple platforms and devices. We approach digital evidence with the same care as physical evidence, explained one Birmingham detective speaking about investigative procedures generally. Messages, social media, location data, these create a picture of events just as clearly as fingerprints or DNA. As January turned to February, the investigation continued behind the scenes. Forensic analysis of the ballistic evidence offered promising results. The markings on the shell casings matched those from other crime scenes in the area, suggesting the same weapon had been used in multiple incidents. This connection would eventually lead investigators toward Damon McDaniel. Witness interviews expanded beyond the immediate neighborhood. Investigators spoke with Mia's wider circle of acquaintances, seeking anyone who might have knowledge about conflicts, threats, or concerning interactions in the weeks before her death. These conversations helped build a more complete picture of Mia's life and the circumstances that might have made her vulnerable. The breakthrough came through the combination of physical and digital evidence. The ballistic connection to other crimes, the digital trail surrounding the Facebook Live broadcast, and witness statements all pointed toward a single suspect. By late February 2025, investigators had sufficient evidence to seek an arrest warrant for Damon McDaniel. At this point in our investigation, I want to thank you for staying with this difficult story. Understanding these cases helps us all recognize how violence develops and might be prevented. If you're finding this account informative, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell. Your engagement supports our commitment to thorough, respectful coverage of these complex cases. What made the case against McDaniel particularly compelling was the pattern that emerged. The 22-year-old Fairfield resident wasn't just suspected in Mia's death. He was potentially linked to multiple homicides across the Birmingham area. The method, the weapon, the approach all showed remarkable consistency. As investigators built their case, they discovered that McDaniel's actions often followed a strategy: identify targets through social connections, create public controversy around them, then strike when they were vulnerable. The Facebook Live setup queen accusation fit this pattern perfectly. A public denouncement followed by a deadly ambush. By February 25, 2025, police had gathered enough evidence to make their move. The arrest warrant was issued, charging McDaniel with intentional murder. Given the severity of the charge and his alleged connection to multiple homicides, the court ordered he be held without bond, a decision that reflected both the evidence against him and potential danger he posed to the community. The hunt for answers had led from shell casings in a Birmingham driveway to a suspect allegedly responsible for as many as 14 murders. What began as a single tragedy had revealed something far more extensive, a pattern of violence that had gone unrecognized until Mia's death brought it into focus. To understand the full magnitude of Mia Nixon's case, we must examine the man ultimately charged with her murder. Damon McDaniel, 22, from Fairfield, Alabama, was not a first-time offender when authorities connected him to Mia's death. Court documents and police records paint a disturbing portrait of a man whose alleged violence extended far beyond a single incident. This wasn't a person who acted impulsively in a moment of anger. This was someone who had allegedly developed a pattern of deliberate, premeditated violence. The number of cases potentially linked to a single suspect is extraordinary, noted one criminal justice expert consulted about the case. When you see multiple homicides with similar characteristics, it suggests a level of planning that goes beyond spontaneous violence. McDaniel's method appeared consistent across multiple cases. He would identify targets through social connections, often using social media as both surveillance tool and weapon. The public accusation against Mia, labeling her a setup queen on Facebook Live, matched this approach. By broadcasting accusations, McDaniel created both distraction and justification, making his subsequent actions seem like responses rather than initiations. This tactic, using public forums to cast victims in a negative light before attacking, served multiple purposes. It created confusion about motive, potentially misdirecting investigators toward other suspects with apparent grievances against the victim. It also isolated targets from potential defenders, making them more vulnerable in the crucial hours following a public accusation. The timing in Mia's case, approximately 30 minutes between the Facebook Live broadcast and the shooting, suggests both planning and opportunism. McDaniel or associates knew exactly when to strike, after the accusation had been made, but before the target could fully process or respond to it. What particularly disturbed investigators was the efficiency of McDaniel's approach. After shootings, he reportedly departed quickly, leaving minimal evidence beyond ballistic materials. Had those shell casings not connected multiple crime scenes, the pattern might have remained hidden longer. But what connected McDaniel specifically to Mia Nixon? Investigators have not publicly disclosed the full nature of their association, but court documents hint at an element that adds another disturbing layer to the case: the possibility that Mia's murder was a contract killing. The murder-for-hire angle emerged as investigators traced the digital and personal connections surrounding the case. While authorities have not named any additional suspects who might have commissioned the killing, the theory has become part of the broader investigation. If proven true, it would suggest that someone specifically targeted Mia, hiring McDaniel to carry out the attack. This theory helps explain certain elements of the case, particularly why Mia might have been selected as a target despite having no obvious direct conflicts with McDaniel. It also raises troubling questions about who might have wanted her dead and why they would resort to such extreme measures. The morning after Mia's murder, McDaniel reportedly continued his normal routines, showing no outward signs of someone who had just committed a homicide. This behavioral control, the ability to compartmentalize violent actions, is noted by criminal psychologists as common among those who commit multiple violent crimes. The capacity to separate violent behavior from everyday life is what allows repeated offenses, explained one behavioral analyst, speaking generally about violent crime patterns. The absence of visible guilt or stress makes detection much more difficult. What makes McDaniel's case particularly significant is not just the number of alleged victims, but the methodical nature of his approach. This wasn't chaotic violence. It was systematic. Each step, from identifying targets to public accusations to the actual attacks, followed a recognizable pattern that, once identified, allowed investigators to connect cases that might otherwise have remained separate in the files. For Mia Nixon, the tragedy lies not just in being one of many victims, but in how preventable her death might have been had this pattern been recognized sooner. The Facebook Live setup queen accusation wasn't random. It was, investigators believe, the signature of a predator who had struck before and would have likely continued had he not been identified and apprehended. As we conclude our examination of Mia Nixon's case, I invite you to join our community of viewers committed to understanding rather than sensationalizing these difficult stories. Your subscription to our channel supports our dedication to thorough research and respectful storytelling. If this case has affected you or prompted thoughts about social media safety, please share your reflections in the comments. By engaging thoughtfully with these stories, we collectively work toward a world where fewer families experience such losses. Thank you for bearing witness to Mia's story, because remembering matters, understanding matters, and working toward change matters most of all.